Okay, welcome back to video 2 of the paradigm shift from Pharaoh's storehouse into the priest storehouse. We're going to be talking about what is a paradigm shift. And I'm going to be explaining the honeypot dream of how all of this really shifted from doing just our family helping people out of debt and getting them set free on multiple different angles to how we were able to start incorporating this into a different, broader group to accelerate the debt elimination through the multiplication of unity. So, what is a paradigm shift? According to Google's definitions, a paradigm shift is a radical change in thinking from an accepted point of view to a new one, necessitated when new scientific discoveries produce anomalies in the current paradigm. Or a radical change in thinking from an accepted point of view to a new belief. And so when you've been doing the same old, and you're getting the same results and it's your normal, that becomes your paradigm. So for example, in our generation, we are programmed to think that debt is normal, that mortgages are good debt. Unless you've been one of those people that have almost gone bankrupt and you're wondering where you're going to go live because the bank is coming to take your house. And then you suddenly realize that, whoops, mortgage debt is not good debt. It's still debt. And so I'm hopefully going to give you a couple snippets of to whet your appetite of what's going to be coming in this 37 part series of how you can start changing your paradigms as we go from Pharaoh's storehouse. And a storehouse is a place where resources are stored. That's the most basic concept of it. And are we putting in and taking out resources from Pharaoh, or are we putting it in and taking it out from the priest's storehouse? Now, with Pharaoh's storehouse, he can only operate on the carnal realm, but the priests have access to both. They can operate in the carnal realm and they can operate on the spiritual realm. And so with this dream that I had, I call it the honeypot dream because in the dream it looked like Pooh's honeypot. It is not anything to do with marijuana, which somebody asked me, was I a drug user when I talked about the honeypot dream? No, it is not marijuana honeypot. I'm talking about cute little kitty Winnie the Pooh's honeypot with like honey dripping out of it, all nice and sticky. So I'm going to see if I can show these little pictures because to give you a little bit of a example, I think this is going to show up backwards. So this is a picture of Pharaoh's storehouse. If you are really good at homeschooling, you know how to read backwards, just like me. And in the dream, there was this cute little man who had his hands full of money. And he was bringing $500 a month into the bank and for loan payments. And he was bringing $500 of tithe into the church house. And that's normal. That is the normal paradigm of what they tell you to do. Bring it to the church building, bring it to the worldly banks, and that's how you function in the world's economy. But then in the dream, it shifted, and all of a sudden I saw underneath the church and the bank were pipes. And the money that the man was putting into the bank and putting into the church building was dropping through down into a pipe, and then they were piping over to a pyramid with an all-seeing eye. Now, when I went digging to find out, okay, what is that really? Because I've seen it on the American dollar before, but what exactly is that? And it is the symbol for basically the New World Order. And so what that dream was showing me was that as we are pouring money into the world's banks and into the church system, as God calls it, we are actually funding the New World Order. One world religion, one world economy, one world control and domination. And then there was part 2 to the dream, which was the priest storehouse. And here, my cute little guy with his hands full of money, he was putting it into Pooh's Honeypot. And he was paying his loans and his tithe into the Honeypot. And this time, it wasn't just one person, it was now 5 groups of people, 5 families that were represented in this dream of all different kinds of families. So in this cute little diagram, I've got a young lady who's tithing into the Honeypot. I've got an old man that is, he's got his Mr. Moneybags. He's tithing into the Honeypot. We've got a family that is tithing to the Honeypot, as well as they need to take loans out of the Honeypot, which are interest-free loans according to biblical law. You do not charge usury or interest on any loans that you give to the brethren that are part of the body of Christ. Because if you do, you're going to get cursed. And it's not fun having those curses, believe me. I've experienced it. And then this gentleman here, he's not tithing into the Honeypot. He is receiving loans out of it. And in this little picture, which is a little hard to see, it's showing him, he's dumping his wallet out and just a couple coins are coming out. So he's not even able to put anything in because he has nothing to put in. Because you are supposed to tithe out of your increase. If you don't have increase, then you can't tithe finances. You tithe your time and the other resources that you do have. And so with that concept, I realized we need to go through a shift from putting our money into banks and into churches, which are not bearing fruit. They are creating slavery. That when we start using this honeypot concept within a home group setting, that the tithe is going in, and then the money that is in that honeypot is now meeting the needs of the group. And then as I continue on with the rest of the series, you're going to hear testimonies of how we shifted from meeting the needs of our group to now our group is completely stable and we were debt-free of non-mortgage debt, that we went on to help establish other small groups that were applying this same concept. And then we started facilitating them to get out of debt. And so now it's you get the ripple effect where when one person is stable or one group is stable, now they are helping to redeem their brethren out of debt. And then it gets contagious when you start seeing the results and seeing the fruit, and then people start hearing the testimony that, wait a minute, you guys are actually loving each other. You mean to tell me that they don't even know you and they're still helping you financially? It's like, my parents wouldn't even help me buy a car and strangers are buying you a car. Who did you say your God was? And then they start getting interested and salvations start coming. And they want to know what is so different about this concept, because they're seeing and they're hearing love in action. It's not go into a church building where you're going to be judged, you're going to be condemned, you're going to be told your hair is too long, you have too many tattoos, you're too much of a sinner. Yes, we do need to live a holy, set-apart life, but you can't expect people who have been lepers all their lives to walk in completely transformed and changed. We need to welcome those lepers in, those untouchables, the rejected ones that the church has rejected and abandoned, the orphaned ones. We need to be ready to go to them with the basin, with the washcloth, and be willing to get down on our knees and wash their feet. And we had a foot washing here where there was a homeless guy that showed up. And you know what? It was pretty interesting was a polite way of saying it. And he was so overwhelmed that somebody was willing to touch him, but not only that, that they were willing to humble themselves instead of treating him like a reject, that somebody was willing to help him. And it was so transformational. And we've been able to maintain a relationship over the last several years and be able to meet the needs that he's willing to let us close enough to meet, because we were willing to serve. We were living to give unconditional love. And as we shift out of being takers, of going and sitting in a church and taking the knowledge, and of the pastors taking the offerings, and it's all very much a pay for play, which I'll get into later about how the church system is currently pimps and prostitutes, which the Lord really shook me up when he gave that language. And how we need to shift out of paying for intimacy, and how we shift into being a family where you don't have to pay your kids. When you are the father, you don't expect your kids to pay you to be a father. It is love that is the motivating factor for you to be a father. I mean, there's a lot of people that are biological dads out there, but they are not fathering. And we need to shift from being a top heavy and everyone's down here. You got the professionals and the lay people, into being a family where we are all equal. Yes, the father is the head of the home. He has the spiritual authority of the home. You got to have order in a home, especially when you got 11 people. Like I mentioned in our first video, you need to have order. You have to have authority in the home in order for things to run smoothly. But everyone is equal. Everyone has a voice. Everyone has a part to play. And when we get back to all hands on deck, when we make that shift where everyone has value, not only the pastor with a salary, where everyone has something to give. Even my 3-year-old is able to give snuggles and give worship and give stories and give attention to people. The grandparents that have dementia currently, they are able to give their service. They are able to give hugs. They are able to give their time and their wisdom that they have. Every person has something to give, and every person needs to receive. And this is one of the things with the paradigm shift that is going to be good for pastors, is that in the church system, they are trapped in a bubble where they have to give because they're paid to give, much like a prostitute. And they have to give that intimacy without a reciprocal giving back. Because when you are trapped inside of that nonprofit charitable system, you are all of a sudden put behind a wall where people have now, like, it's almost the vision that I had was that there was a pastor that was so broken, he was so burnt out, and he wanted to receive love. And somebody was coming willing to give him a hug, but he put out his hand. He's like, you can love me from this distance because I have to maintain my professional demeanor. I have that professional distance that I must maintain because I'm in a professional role. When you shift into the home hub, the father is allowed to be loved as much as the children. And there is a healthy dynamic where everyone is giving and everyone is receiving. And when we make this paradigm shift, it's going to be very hard for the salaried pastors that are cursed, by the way. Micah chapter 3, verse 11 talks about the priests that teach for hire. So that would be a pastor on a salary, prophets that divine for money, and judges that judge for reward. Those three categories are cursed. And by shifting out of the church system from Pharaoh's storehouse into the priest storehouse, we're going to see those curses break. And we are going to start to see the freedom that we never knew that was available. And we've been trying to operate on this much and thinking that that's good when God has like this much. I only have so much of the screen to show you. And my daughter's dream is coming to mind. So my 8-year-old daughter, Sophia, she is quite an avid dreamer. Actually, most of my kids are. And her dream was that there were horses that were very sick. They were very weak, and they were in a bottomless shopping cart inside of a store, like a grocery store. And people were putting things in, all this food into the grocery cart. But the horses were never allowed to eat what was going into the grocery cart. And they were starving to death. And she came along. And so Sophia means wisdom. She comes along and she tries to bring the horses out. And initially she can't do it because they were so weak that they needed to be fed. They needed to be watered. And then once they had enough strength, she was able to get them out of the shopping cart and then lead them with a bridle, showing that they were still trapped in stubbornness, that they needed to be assisted in being led to streams of living water. And once they got to the streams of living water, she was able to take off their bridle. And very, very quickly, those emaciated, sick horses plumped up, and they were healthy, and their fur, their manes were healthy, and they were glistening, and they were frolic around with the freedom. And this is what God is going to be doing over the next 7 years, where he's going to be freeing us from those bottomless shopping carts that are not benefiting us, removing us from the bondage of mammon and from a attitude that Jesus is a commodity, and an attitude where the horses are part of the resources, but in the process they have become slaves. And God is coming to set us free. And for the people who have grown up in that's their comfort zone, that's all they know, stepping into a new realm is scary. And it's with change, people are trying to buck away. They're trying to fight the change. And God is going to put a bridle on those stubborn ones in order to bring them to freedom. And so as God is bringing all of this change, you have a choice. Are you going to fight the change that God is doing in order to bring you freedom, to bring you health and vitality, to bring you to sources of living water, which are going to be the new wineskin? Because the old wineskin is the cracked cisterns, where it's heavy labor of pouring the water into those cisterns that keeps leaking out, and it's not really bringing much benefit for the sheer amount of labor that is going in. Shifting to the new wineskin, where the living springs are inside of each person. And now you're not going to see all those pastors burning out. You're not going to see the pastors running around with all of these full-grown men in dirty diapers, sitting in high chairs with their little sippy bottles and throwing their bottles of milk down on the ground and throwing a full temper tantrum like a toddler This was the vision that God gave me when I walked into a certain church building, and the poor pastor just looked frazzled. And I'm like, God, what's happened to him? And this is what he showed me, that he was trying to keep up and feed all of these men that refused to grow up and feed themselves. And so in this next 7 years, you're going to have to grow up or the brats are going to move out. And this is part of the paradigm shift, that we are going to grow up and mature into holy, consecrated priests. And as we do, we're going to be able to share our living water that Christ is flowing through us, the hope of glory, Christ in us, not Christ up here, not Christ out in a church building. We're not going to have to say, oh, come to church. No, we are going to bring Christ to the people and meet their needs where they are. It's going to be so much more efficient. We're going to get so much more done. And we are going to see an explosion, in a good way, in the manifestation of the kingdom of heaven in our nations. And we are going to take back our nations for the Lord and start bringing freedom in every sphere of society, in every age category. Because wherever there's living water that touches, it brings life and life more abundantly. So this is the end of video 2. I'm going to get off and then get back on for video 3.